evening and welcome to the NDTV Dialogues. This week we once again saw a horrific attack in Nice, France. Before that it was Dhaka, Ankara, Baghdad. The places change, but the motive is the same, creating terror by groups like the ISIS. What is the impact? What is the larger message for India? Again, at a time when reports are coming in of some young Indians being drawn to ISIS. It's a time of great social churning, a week where we've seen great tension in Kashmir. To discuss this further, I have with me two former Home Secretaries, Mr. R.K. Singh, now a BJP MP as well. Also with me, Mr. G.K. Pillai, former Chief Election Commissioner, Dr. S.Y. Quraishi. Also joining me from Hyderabad, MP Asaduddin Owaisi, and journalist Saba Naqvi. Thank you all very much for coming in. Mr. Singh, now as a BJP MP, no longer Home Secretary, when you look at what's happening in the world around us and reports of Indians leaving, pregnant women leaving to join ISIS, what do you think should be the government's main focus at this time? And are you worried about these early signals, perhaps, of attraction to a group like the ISIS for India?
I'm worried. I'm worried. And what I believe should be done, I think it's absolutely essential, is that we need to make sure that any terrorist content on social media is pulled down at once, is blocked at once and pulled down at once. We need to put in place mechanisms for this purpose. It takes time. It takes time. I think we need to work out methodologies so that it takes less time to block sites and so that it takes less time to pull down these messages, because the ISIS has been radicalizing the youth through the social media.
Just to ask the social media, how can that be practical? We've seen this week also Zakir Naik, somebody who's based out of India, broadcasting freely out of India without a license. So forget about licensing social media. We also can't license channels that broadcast from our soil.
No,
so
it's not a question of licensing
how is it
social
feasible?
Media. No, it's not a question of licensing social media. It's a question of getting them to respond to your requests or requests of your police agencies quickly. Now that has bthe taking time, and that was a major headache for me, and I'm quite sure for Mr. Pillai as well when he was the Home Secretary. It was a major headache. I mean, you would write to our agencies would write to these companies, and these companies were all based out of the United States, and sometimes they would respond, sometimes they just wouldn't respond, or they would respond very late. Now by that time the problem had already spread.
Do you think you've also talked about this attraction of social media and how that needs to be monitored perhaps, but when you look at a situation like Kashmir, where say the internet is blocked, that's not stopping protests. Is there just one way, perhaps very practical, some would say perhaps a bureaucratic way of looking at it? Is that actually evading from what the real issue is? Why are young people, whether they're Muslims or, I mean, now the whole debate is on Islamic terrorism, but why are young people attracted to this message of a group like the ISIS in the first place?
No, I think I agree partly with what Mr. R.K. Singh says, that you need some control in the social media, especially when, shall I say, inflammatory statements or messages are being distributed. But I think the fundamental reason is that there is a certain sense of injustice which many young people feel across communities on certain issues which affect them. They see that on the social media, they see it on the TV, they see it in the wider spectrum, and therefore they are then much more, shall I say, susceptible to being attracted by this propaganda, if you want to put it that way. And therefore, I think it's a great tribute to India that we've been able to withstand this. And I said it earlier that I think the real tribute is that our communities and our families have managed to keep a control over our children, because we talk in the family, we talk in the community, there's a lot of democracy and discussion, and that has made sure that even those who are exposed to this don't actually take to the path of violence, because they see that there is hope within India and possibilities of, shall I say, correcting some of the injustice. And that is very, very critical.
So let me just get in Mr. Owaisi from Hyderabad to join us now. Mr. Owaisi, the debate about controlling the medium, but what about the larger message? You gave a very strong speech, sir, about how the ISIS are dogs from hell. You've been called non-Muslims by them. But you've also got your critics who have pointed to the fact that some of the speeches made by you, made by your brother, can be looked at as inciting. That do we sometimes, do our political leaders, and not just you, but look at creating a sense of victimhood amongst different communities rather than looking at unity? Why is it that we have parties which cater to, say, a Muslim identity, a Dalit identity? Why are we not looking at parties which create much more of a national identity?
Well, you can disagree with my speeches, that is your democratic right, but show me one speech of mine or any speech of my party member which has incited people to go against my country, India. So that point has to remember that yes, you have all the right to disagree, but I cannot stop myself from stating the truth, which I believe is the truth. Secondly, your point about why should we have X party, this party, that party. See, caste and religion is a reality in India. So it might look very good on your part to sit in a studio and talk about it. I cannot stop you, but caste and religion is a reality. Thirdly, when I talk about Muslim empowerment, this is what I am doing because I am creating confidence in the minorities that our fight is for our rights, which the Constitution of India has given to us. Now you need more voices. Maybe you need better voices than me, because of you have a bigger so-called secular parties who have never addressed the issue of Muslim empowerment and development apart from holding some iftar parties or Sufi conferences. I accept that yes, ISIS is one of the biggest challenges within Islam, but to say that it's a challenge to Indian Muslims, we have the lowest per capita people getting involved in ISIS, that is 1 per million. And in your initial remarks, you talked about those 21 people going from Kerala. Please remember, they have not joined ISIS. Don't put them in the account of ISIS. They are in Afghanistan right now. If they want to live in a time where there was no electricity, where there was no modern day comfort, so be it. So, but let us be very clear that that ISIS is a problem, but you cannot arrest innocent Muslim boys just because they are viewing what is available on social media. And as a member of the community, I can tell you very clearly, it's not only me, but every scholar, every responsible person within the Muslim community have condemned ISIS, and we continue to do. And yes, tomorrow ISIS will not be there. Their military capacity will be gone because they have lost 30% of the territory. But the bigger challenge to the whole world, and especially the Islamic world and to our country, is how to crush that ideology. In fact, that is how wherein we have to put our heads together and ensure that this ideology, which is evil, has to be crushed and finished forever.
I'm very glad to hear you using such strong words against ISIS as you have earlier. But it's interesting you made that point about that your focus has always been on speeches for the country, because at the moment you're currently facing a case of sedition filed by a local resident of Hyderabad, who says that your decision to give legal defense to 5 younger men in Hyderabad charged of joining the ISIS, of being involved in terror links, has been said as anti-national. The BJP has attacked you for it. So in that sense, when I talk about political rhetoric, it is about who's anti-national or who's not, and that if you've said this, then you are anti-national. There is a sense of political division, rather than, as you talked about, all parties putting your heads together. So why don't you and the BJP and the Congress and other parties put your heads together on this?
Of course, when it comes to the security of India, integrity of India, I have already said that I am willing to leave aside all my political affiliations and rise up to the occasion. Because, Mr. R.K. Singh is in BJP, other panelists might be having some sympathy for other parties, but when it comes to the nation, all of us are together. So I don't think so there can be any debate on as far as protecting India is concerned. There can be debate on ways and methods of what the security agencies are doing, which I feel is not in a proper way.
Dr. Quraishi, do you want to come in on that?
Well, I agree with the entire panel that ISIS is fighting in the name of Islam, but I think they are doing the biggest disservice to Islam. 95% of the people killed by them are Muslims. Therefore, I don't know what Islam are they fighting for. And my own experience has been, as an old resident of Delhi for the last 500 years, that most Muslims of India have been oblivious to what was happening anywhere else in the world. In fact, so much so that even what was happening in Kashmir, the rest of Indian Muslims were really not affected and bothered about. But that has changed partly because of social media.
As former election commissioner, I know that you fought for that there should be much stricter laws against hate speech when politicians campaign. So do you find it interesting? You said you can't sit in a television studio, but some of the things said by various politicians across religions while they're campaigning are communal. And when we ignore issues like that and we talk about, say, perhaps looking at social media or why the youth is a disconnect, is it also because traditional notions of secularism, traditional notions of communalism are now out of the window and young people want answers which actually cater to this feeling of injustice Mr. G.K. Pillai raised now?
Yes, quite right. You know, election laws, in fact, all the laws of the land are adequate. And election laws particularly, there you can't indulge in hate speech, you can't use any religious place for discourse, and we come down heavily. Because during the election
That's
period,
implementation, that's
yes,
a problem.
Yes, and also during the model code of conduct, when election commission's danda is prevailing, then they do behave. But before and after, and what goes quietly is very, very strong. In fact, there is a recent issue of Outlook which deals with this problem. I think use this as a textbook because all the views across the board are all here, including G.K. Pillai's interview, some note by me. And I was very happy to see Tarun Vijay, who is a BJP MP and RSS person. And he has referred to what you asked me. He says if communal passions and fear psychosis is used to win elections, you may win one state but lose the nation. I think he has hit the nail on the head.
Saba Naqvi, when you come in on this point about, we've seen the initial part of focusing so much on social media being used as an instrument to spread this. Are we evading the actual issue?
We are. First of all, what is ISIS?
What do you think what's happening in Kashmir? Why young people across the world, educated people are looking at ISIS as a possible answer?
What is ISIS? ISIS is a deformity that has appeared in lands, Iraq and Syria, which have been destroyed by the West, by meddling of foreign powers. Let's be very clear. It's a very deformed thing that's happened in another part of the world. What is now the kind of cruelty, the kind of barbarism that we've seen? But these are countries which were destroyed by wars. And then these horrible things began to mutate in that part of the world. That is what ISIS is. It is a very deformed thing, which means shell-shocked, it's come out of there. We've seen the flight of Syrians, we've seen what's happened. I mean, these are destroyed lands from where this happened. Now in Kashmir, there has been a movement for independence. Since our independence, it's always been there. People have never, cruelty has never been used against normal citizens. It's against the Indian state at times. I'm being analytical here, I'm not legitimizing it. It's become fearful to say things honestly. That is what people in Kashmir do not go around beheading and chopping and taking like sex slaves and doing the kind of evil, barbaric things that the ISIS has started to do. And it's never been like that. But what's happened here is, what's happening is, unfortunately, India was one country. Look at, okay, so our subcontinent, a lot of the Islam came to what is now Pakistan, India and Bangladesh through a very Sufi syncretistic way. It's already changed in Pakistan. It's gone. I mean, you just had a Sufi Qawwali singer being assassinated. It's already been purged. The indigenous traditions that made Islam beautiful, that I think made it beautiful, others may disagree, they may want a more puritanical version of Islam, that's fine, that's everybody's free to do that. It's already been purged in Pakistan. The project is underway in Bangladesh. In our country, we've not had this problem. I mean, look at the population of Muslims, we've not had this problem. But what's happened simultaneously is that there are serious concerns about Muslims being profiled, Muslims being picked up. What's happening? I mean, you see the Facebook outpourings in Kashmir, you know, and you should see them after Muhammad Akhlaq's family has been is now going to face criminal charges. Just see that. Thank you for, you know, what Kashmiris are saying about that. All of that plays into the narrative that this is what is happening in India. This is what a Muslim man is lynched over a cow, and then 8 or 10 months later, his family is facing criminal charges.
I'm going to bring Mr. Singh in on that because, interestingly, when you joined the BJP, you made the point that you joined because you agreed with the ideology. You believe in the nationalistic line the RSS actually propagated. When we look at perhaps, and when we talk about political churning or an impact that comes out, that there are two sides of the coin. If we talk about Mr. Owaisi's campaign in Bihar, which was criticized by many Bihar politicians, let's look at also some of the speeches made by Uttar Pradesh politicians of BJP leaders who have talked about the Akhlaq lynching, saying, oh, we must file a case against the family. Do you think there needs to be much greater calm maturity in the statements made by political leaders, including from your party, in a situation, say the Akhlaq case, it's a sensitive issue?
My view is that what happened in the Akhlaq case was wrong, was bad. The fact that, you know, he had given a son, he has to our armed forces, and then, you know, if the government, I mean the state government could not protect that family, it was bad, it was wrong. I think we need to have come out stronger and in condemning what happened. And I do believe that my view is that these charges which have been slapped on Akhlaq's family are wrong. I am very clear about that. And you know, there are some hotheads in the party, and those hotheads have been pulled up, and by and large I think they have toned down their rhetoric. But let's not get diverted. You see, the two are very different. What's happening in India and what ISIS is are very different. ISIS represents a philosophy in Islam, a narrow philosophy of Wahhabism and Salafism. Now, Wahhabism and Salafism are the most rabid, exclusivist philosophies. They believe that even amongst Muslims, for example, Shias, they believe to be kafirs who deserve to be killed. Even amongst Muslims, Ahmadiyas, they deserve to be killed. Anybody who is not a Salafist or a Wahhabi, they believe him to be kufr.
No, we've seen attacks in Baghdad, in Medina,
they believe him
yes.
to be fit for killing.
Yes.
Now that is, and they believe in going back to the caliphate. They believe in establishing a worldwide, one country throughout the world under a caliph who will be a religious head and a temporal head, both.
Yes.
Now, and it is their propaganda which is going around. Now, how are they going around? They are not sending preachers. Sorry, they are doing it through the net. How is the ISIS propaganda reached India? They are doing it through the net. Now, we are very lucky. I mean, we are very, very lucky that our people are different. You know, of all the foreign recruits with the ISIS, India has the lowest number. The last number, which was officially sort of whatever we got information about, was 18, whereas even Ireland had 160. Even Ireland had 160, for example, and Belgium had about 250.
So, of course, the interesting thing is that in India, because Muslims are Indians, not immigrants, so perhaps that also addresses one issue. But just I wanted you to respond to what Mr. Owaisi made the point that as an Indian, he talks of unity of the country. But when there are certain issues that a politician like him, he says, is addressing issues of a certain community because these have been ignored for so long. Do you feel that this is a new kind of politics, which is what the reality is today, because traditional parties have actually ignored this completely, because there is a young, and Mr. Owaisi, we know even in Bihar, is very popular amongst young Muslims, because the young feel left out.
I know. And in fact, you know, there is space for Mr. Owaisi, or you know.
Do you agree with his politics?
No, there is space for Mr. Owaisi and for religious politics, only because the other parties have allowed that to happen. And I think the other parties, the national parties, need to address this more. So that you don't have, you know, parties based on religion or parties based on caste. We need to get away from this. If we want to make our country strong and great, and we need to get away from religion, we need to get away from caste.
So do you agree with his politics when he says he wants to defend young Muslim boys because he feels that often they're just labelled as terrorists or just picked up and assume that they're terrorists? Do you agree with his politics when the BJP calls it anti-national?
No. If somebody is charged with, you know, with a certain crime, etc., then I mean, if you feel that somebody is innocent, I mean, you can speak out. If anybody, whether he is a Hindu or a Muslim, you should speak out. You can speak out. You should speak out. But to defend terrorists as a policy, that is wrong.